in a sec. Excellent. Welcome everyone, and welcome John to the webinar, which is entitled Sounds Like Sustainability. It's actually a series of webinars and beautiful conversations that we are holding as part of the collaboration between the Centre for Communication and Social Change at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia, and the International Environmental Communication Association. And for your information, I will put both links or the links to both organizations in the chat. I'm very, very grateful that you're here, John, and I'm excited to talk a bit about art as a form of communication in the space of environment and sustainability. And at the beginning, because this webinar is about sound and what sounds like sustainability and sometimes what sounds like sustainability but isn't, I would like to invite you to briefly introduce yourself and talk a bit about where you are and what kind of sounds you hear at the moment. Hello, John.
Hello, Francesca, and hello everybody else, and thanks for joining today. I hope the sound is clear. Is my volume clear? Can everybody hear me? Okay, that's good. All right, so I've just been setting up my little laptop here on top of a plastic rubbish bin. So there's been sounds of plastic plopping all over the tables and things like that, because much that I love the halo look, I just also wanted to get a little bit of light from from the light above, so that you could probably get a bit of a sense of more what I look like, rather than just a white halo around a head, which is not such a bad thing anyway, I think, to aspire to. So what I can hear in this room where I am is the faint sounds of people out at the reception, this is an office, there's some people at the reception where I'm working, and that's lovely too, because it's just a nice chit chat of people having conversations and discussing things towards the end of a day, and that is all very lovely and nice. And so there's a very nice soft feeling here at the moment. I'm imagining in my mind the sound of the ocean, because if you were to ask me what is my sound of sustainability, for me it's always the ocean. Well, not always, but mostly it's the ocean, and that's simply because I really relate very much to the ocean. I live by the ocean in Byron Bay. I also have an apartment up here in Brisbane where my sounds are much more the sounds of the Brisbane River, which goes past the apartment down to Story Bridge, or the sound of Vulture Street traffic outside, which also happens. And then occasionally the birds come and sit on my balcony, which has a beautiful view of the city of Brisbane and that river. And that's something that I also enjoy. But much of my time is spent either by the ocean when I walk and I collect plastics, which I do on a regular basis, either in Byron Bay, from the beaches in Byron Bay, to make art out of, or if I'm on Magnetic Island, where I also I'm fortunate enough to own a house there as well, and I often go there. I was there a week or so ago on my vacation, and also walking around to various bays and around rocks and things like that, and collecting more plastics to include in the artworks that I make from the plastics that I collect that are washed up from the ocean. It's basically ocean litter. And most of that ocean litter comes in from the waterways around Townsville, because Magnetic Island is just off the coast of Townsville. And it's also ocean litter, which is just out in the ocean, may have been part of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch at one stage and broke away, and now, some of the many billions or trillions of pieces of plastic that are caught in the oceans these days. I have a great care for the ocean. I have, I'm not going to jump ahead of myself and answer some of the questions that have come my way earlier on. However, I do have a commitment as a practicing visual artist to make commentary about these social and environmental issues that are currently with us. And I see that as being a cornerstone of my being a practicing visual artist and environmental artist, which is what I've been now for the last 25 years. And prior to that, I was working as a painter and having exhibitions of paintings and things like that. And that resulted from my doing an arts degree training at the Victorian College of the Arts in my earlier years. And yes, and quite by accident, it led on to me becoming an environmental artist where I was collecting plastics from the beaches. So that's a little intro. I'm now lecturing at a university. I'm a senior lecturer over at University of Canberra. I teach here in Brisbane through the partnership between the University of Canberra and TAFE Queensland. So it's on the South Bank, how would you say it, the campus here. It's a wonderful campus, world-class facilities, which is why I was attracted here. And yes, I really enjoy my teaching role as well, and being able to give back on another level to students and to people who are really interested in learning. And I run the honours program here. I look after the postgraduate department and teach visual arts. So there's a little wrap about what I do.
Thank you so much. That is wonderful. And I think there were a few things that you mentioned that I definitely want to talk about. And one thing I just think, like, where the common ground for the people joining this call and who are interested in being part of this conversation, even after the conversation, so beyond this webinar, is that we want to better understand the role of communication, influencing or driving and directing our human nature relationship. And you mentioned two very interesting forms of communication or environmental communication. One is definitely the teaching bit. It is educating, it is inspiring students and interested people. The other one was related to your art, where you said, I want to make a commentary on what is happening out there. And I think this is a very interesting perspective, and I would love to hear your definition of environmental art or eco art, and maybe there are some differences that need to be clarified.
Okay, so as far as definitions are concerned, I think I fall into the role of an environmental artist, and I have for the last 25 years or so since I've started making this work. Because around the time that I started making it, there weren't too many people working with the type of materials that I was working, and that is the washed up plastics from around the beach. So I entered the art world, having been a painter and having been recognized as a painter, suddenly working with assemblage work, sculptures and things like this. My sculpture, the Thong Totems, won the Win Prize at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. That was back in the year 2000, and that was one of the early entries for me into the art world with my environmental art. I'd been showing for about 3 years prior to that, but this was the first time that it received some sort of national recognition. And in those days, I don't think I even called myself an environmental artist. I think the works were called, I think they were called contemporary landscapes in those days. And then people started calling me an environmental artist. Not that I'm an environmentalist, because I'm not. I'm an artist, and that's first and foremost. I've been picked up by various organisations like Clean Up Australia and Clean Up the World, who promoted me as being the official artist of the new millennium for Clean Up Australia and Clean Up the World, and things like this. And it all sounded very, very highbrow and everything. And the questions that came from the people who ran these organizations, like Ian Kiernan and Kim Mackay, who I forged a very close friendship with in Sydney at the time. And she said, John, what's the most important thing for you? Being an environmentalist or being an artist? And I said, oh, easy, being a contemporary visual artist. That is my main concern. And I have had this concern for almost 20 years. And however, my work is, the cornerstone of my work is sharing a message about the environment and about social issues that we're currently facing. And I believe that this is really one of the things that that is important for me. I can't speak for other people, but I believe that it's important for artists to be showing and revealing contemporary issues in their work. And that's what makes it really powerful. That's what makes it even more powerful. I have many friends who paint pictures of flowers, and that's all very good. And I love them for it because they're very beautiful images and it brings joy to people's hearts. I love that. For me, that's not my path. It's important for me to create works of beauty, which is a very challenging thing when you're using trash from beaches that mostly people have the opinion, oh, that's really ugly. So you've already got this layering of ugliness being applied to the objects that you're using. So the challenge then is even greater. How can I actually use these materials and create something of beauty? And that's where I had to look back on my training as a painter, with all of the training in form, color, aesthetics, composition, line, and all of these different other elements to create something of beauty. It's not easy being an environmental artist working with discarded materials, by the way. It can be if you're going to make very blunt statements about things, but I am not into making lazy art or blunt statements. I like things to have a certain amount of elegance and sophistication. And that's where I like my work to be placed.
Mm-hmm. That is wonderful. I do see that there is one part of environmental or eco art that is more blunt, as you said, which is potentially a bit lazy. And I really like this idea of there is then another part that you're emphasizing, which is around creating the beauty and being very elegant. I was chatting to another artist whose main purpose it was to irritate, to crack certain patterns of thinking, to crack certain ways of behavior. Do you see potential of art in that space, and how would that work?
Well, absolutely. You're always walking a fine line with what you're presenting out there to the public, because, and I know this line because I've curated exhibitions over in New York, I've been in exhibitions there, and in many places across the globe. And I've seen a lot of different things, and to the point where one of these, I guess you call it an interruption into an art space, was one of the people who wanted to be an exhibition I was curating in New York. Well, I was co-curating with another curator, and she really wanted this one person to be in this exhibition who'd applied and was well known in that particular area. And that comprised of about 15 big black garbage bags full of rubbish. And it actually really stank. And she really wanted that person to be in the exhibition. They were just going to be all dumped together, boom, in the middle of the exhibition, or not in the middle, but in a room as part of the exhibition. And I was against it because I found it very abrupt and blunt, if you can put the two together. And I didn't feel that there was a certain alchemy that had taken place with that work. But we let it go ahead, and it was received with mixed. Mixed responses from people. And in a way, that was an interruption into the space. I know that people are doing that. The audience for that and the appreciation for that can be very varied. I'm very aware of that when I have exhibitions of my work. I'm going to have a show here in Brisbane at the beginning of September. And the work that I'll be putting in that show, I think will be received mostly very positively by people, because the works do have, I'm not trying to make something nice out of something that has an inherent, you could call it ugliness about it, but it has inherent challenges about it. And I think the work will be received well. Probably more so than if somebody was to get a dump truck and tip out the dump truck on the street to make a statement about, which would be an intervention in some way or other, or an interruption. And that person might be taken to jail for doing something like that. But they might call it art. So there's all sorts of different ways of going about this, and finding a fine line with it is always a very delicate balance. And I'm constantly trying to find that myself, because I'm always working with new techniques and new directions in the work constantly. And I've been doing that ever since I started on this path of being an environmental artist, which was, it's been for the last 25 years or so.
I'm sometimes when you talk to people, I think they are very responsive to exactly what you do. But I think there are also people who might need the disruption, who might need this. I don't know. I'm just sometimes I'm sometimes talking to people where I feel like, oh my God, like this is they really need this one, even if it's blunt, even if it's like very, I don't know, simplistic, and even very reductionist, but they need this kind of one big disruption. Do you feel the same, or do you think people are already today, they are already aware of problems, of global challenges, of crisis situations, and they are ready for this, for the more reflective way to present art?
Well, what you're presenting me with here is a question, and it's basically, it's always been a very interesting question for me, and that is, what is art? Now, I only know what art is for myself, and I believe that art has to have the ability to transcend, to have an alchemy whereby the viewing public, or at the very least, the artists themselves, has some kind of an epiphany, some kind of a transformation through being in the presence of that particular piece of work. I had an experience with Mark Rothko, for example, in his chapel over in the Tate Gallery in London many, many years ago, where I stood in that room for around about 20 minutes or so, or half an hour, before I started literally bawling in tears. And I did not know what was happening. And I was only to discover many, many years later that Mark Rothko made the statement, if people do not come to tears in the presence of my work, they're missing something. And I was like, my God. And I didn't know why this all happened, but it was there. He was very suicidal at the time when he did these works, and he ended up committing suicide. I have suicide in my family, so it may have been reverberating something there. So that was actually a very strong thing. Now, coming back to your question, there is something I'd like to say about expectations that an artist might have of the viewing public. And I never have an expectation that people get my work, or or somehow or other see the environment in a different way, I'm pleasantly surprised, because I see the limitation of art being having the capacity to bring about that sort of change. I think it can help, but I'm realistic about it. I believe that art can have a possibility of communicating these messages, but they're never going to communicate, I believe, the same sort of message that direct communication about the environment and images or advertisements or whatever it is about what is going on with the environment itself. If somebody comes up to me or makes comments, and it has happened to me on many occasions where people have said to me, I saw your exhibition, I saw your artwork, I saw your website, or whatever it is, and my experience of walking along the beach has never been the same since seeing your work. And that for me is, yeah, that is a positive, but it's not an expectation. It's just, it's there in the work as a possibility for people to have that awareness and have that, because the work itself, let me open another door here about my work. In some ways, I see the work, it's like it has the beauty that brings people in. It's like the little carrot that brings people in. And once they're into the work and they're appreciating the beauty and all of the varied colors and things like this, then they get a slap across the face about the environment and about this is something that is a problem for humanity. And the garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean is now 2 to 3 times the size of Texas, and it's getting bigger. And that's only the top of it. It goes down like a iceberg. That's actually how these garbage patches in the Pacific Ocean and various places around off the coast of Japan and different places, that's how they are. So people get attracted to the work, then they get a slap. And so it has this dual thing. And that's why I say my work always exists on a razor's edge. Or it happens the other way around. They get a slap when they see all these plastics, oh my God. And then they enter the work and they appreciate the beauty. So, so there's these sort of things happening in tandem with each other.
I love that. I really love that. And just one question, and then I really want to open the discussion to everyone who's in the Zoom
Yes.
and who's participating here. My sound is actually that I'm always fascinated about is the birds, especially the birds in Brisbane or in Queensland. And it's amazing how people react to the birds when I talk to them and they are somewhere in Europe or somewhere in the United States. They always go like, oh my God, these birds are loud. And you tend to forget if you're here how loud they actually are. And when you travel back to Europe, you'd be like, oh my God, that's actually quite cute, those tiny little bird voices over there. So it's really different. And it leads me to a question, because you have seen so many places on this earth, and it's beautiful to look around in this conversation here, to look at all the people who are joining today, and they come from very different places on this planet. And I'm wondering if you have an opinion or a feeling on where art is already is already used as the wrong term. I'm just lacking another term, or where art is already happening in which country, and where there is attention for that, and where are those people that I don't know, take the pathway in recognizing the beauty and then stumbling into this environmental communication space, or the other way around, people that need the slap in the face first and then get into art. Like where are beautiful things happening in this environmental art space? I don't know if you have any stories to tell about like from a global perspective. Is this something that is happening in Australia already? Is this something where Australia is still a couple of years behind, for example, Europe, as it is potentially in other climate change or environmental related spaces. Where's Australia, and do you have any reflection on what is happening in other corners of this world?
And I'm understanding from that, Francisca, is that you were saying about art and the environment. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes.
Okay. I would say that it's a global phenomenon, and I simply, okay, I guess I say that because I have a presence globally, and my website generates a lot of traffic, which is a global response to the work. That said, also I know that there are a lot of people in places like Australia that have taken on experimenting with this particular way of expression, and that is using plastics that are washed up from the beaches in their artwork, some more successfully than others. And not everybody is using plastics and things like that, but there are a lot in terms of, I look at my own genre, and it's a specified area. And when I first started doing this, there weren't, I don't know of anybody else who was actually working with them. There were a couple of British artists that worked in a very different theme years prior to that. But I think that they were mainly getting their plastics from op shops and different places like that. It wasn't a beach litter type of thing, and that's become much more how would you say, positive? Yeah, I suppose it's positive, and a lot more prevalent here in Australia because of our beach culture. And because many people are walking to the kids, my work is on the syllabus in high schools and primary schools and things like that. So, and universities even. So people are getting much more access to this type of expression, and they're beginning to use that in their own art as well. But it is a global thing, and I'm seeing it happening globally. That, I was in an exhibition, for example, over at the University of, not the university, the Museum of Anchorage in Alaska. It was a big exhibition with probably about 30 artists, and we all showed a number of works, and we're invited from across the globe to join this. And there are people like Chris Jordan, who uses a lot of cups and things like that, and makes photos of those cups. And anyway, there are a lot of different people. And it was a great exhibition, and that went traveling. It was called Gaia, and it was artists responding to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And it was probably about 15 years ago that ended up traveling to, where was it? It ended up going to San Francisco, then it went to another place it traveled to 3 major museums, and it was a really, really successful show. So even around 15 years ago, also there were a number of artists by then who had started doing work, and we had this great exhibition. So yeah, it's getting more and more popular, and I love it. I love being a mentor to people when they're starting to enter into the field, and they're contacting me and they're saying, "Oh, John, can you give me some advice about this?" And I do, to a certain degree. I'm not going to give away all of my secrets, but I'm quite happy to give them a little bit of guidance if they're asking some questions that, as an educator, I'm happy to share and give them some help and give them some assistance somehow or another.
That's awesome. So I'm happy to open the floor now for all your questions to everyone who's here today. Hey, Elska.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to to raise this thing that has been going through my head all along while you were talking. So, I mean, I'm an ecologist by training, and then got into this field of communication for social change. So it's really that link between environment, ecology, people, communication is very close to my heart, and I find fascinating how art is a tool of communication as well. So my branch of communication is much more, is really participatory communication through dialogue and, to support processes of what we call conscientization, the deep awareness raising and becoming aware of action and empowerment. So, and I think, what I heard in what you were saying, particularly about that process that people look at your art and they get the slap in the face, and then start looking at it differently. That is actually conscientization in a way, right? But the way you describe it, it was more as if it starts with just a passive process. You make the art, you communicate how you make it, and people consume it, and then something happens to them. But to what extent are you involved in actually facilitating that process of amongst a group of people or individuals, and to actually use your art to facilitate a dialogue about, okay, what do we do about our environment, or what does art mean in our lives, and how can we use these products that clean up the environment, for instance? Is there do you have any examples or any intentions or any opportunities for that?
Yes, I do have a little segment. It's a video on my website where it shows a good example of when I went to Indonesia. The Australian government, the consulate, took me over there to work with Indonesian artists, students and university professors to clean up beaches over there. And I was teaching them how to work with objects and it was a big problem over there at the time. It still is, but it's getting better over there because the government is really bringing an awareness campaign, and they're doing major cleanups, and they're tipping their trucks of rubbish into the canals, which all get blown out to the sea or washed out to the sea. And it's been this ongoing system for 20, 30 years or so now. Now, that was a very successful program where we ended up creating a whole series of totemic works with around 30 or 40 people as part of this, out of styrofoam that was collected off the beaches. And it was a really beautiful, I guess it was a beautiful result. It was a beautiful process. And everybody really had a lot of aha moments where they really saw that it was possible to create something beautiful out of something that everybody was just complaining about and walking around. Some people were going, "You are a bad person for doing this." And everybody's sick of that. People, and that's been my experience all the way through as an educator and as an artist. People are sick of being told that they're bad for destroying the environment. But when they get a message which is more subtle and more about showing other possibilities of renewal and other possibilities of creativity, they're more likely to respond to it in a positive way and to actually do something about it. I don't know whether that's answering your question. I hope it has somehow or other helped to do that. But you will see on the website, it's called the it's called the Indonesian artist in residence or something like that there, and it has a whole video which was produced at that time, and it's a really great video which shows the whole process of doing that, and then a presentation of a wonderful resort there for the public at a symposium there. Did that help, Elske?
Yes, and it is a very good example, but you don't actually kind of use, I don't know whether you do exhibitions or, around Australia that where you actually involve some sort of a process, or is it just let people consume and see and have this experience?
When you say consume, you mean look at the work and
look at and reflect and
yes.
Kind of
well, that is how I've been largely presenting my work, is in exhibitions, year in year out. As sometimes I have installations and things which is slightly different from a normal exhibition. There are various kind of ways that I go about it, but I don't do workshops, for example.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, this is not something that I've preferred to stay away from, simply because I don't have time. I prefer to have an exhibition, whether it be a touring exhibition or whatever it is. And yeah, and then sometimes I will do things like go to different countries, whether it be over in America. I was artist in residence in America and did a whole series of work, sculptures based on plastic bags and recycled plastic bags. And we've got a whole community involvement in doing that sort of thing. So that was also something that, you know, so I do these projects as well, but I don't do like weekend workshops where we all work with plastics from the beach. That's not my thing.
Yeah. Maybe a very quick related question to that. Do you see that there is potential in media, especially social media, to then facilitate a conversation about all the experiences that people make and all the thinking that gets started and get activated? Do you think there is potential, and if so, which kind of media would potentially facilitate these conversations the best?
Well, I think that we're doing it right now.
I love that, by the way.
For example, I think this is a really no, I think that this is a really good way to go about it as a further extension from exhibition, from doing an artist in residence program with a community or something like that. This is an excellent thing, and this is why I said yes to it, because it's the next step is creating podcasts and creating hopefully like a journal article or something like that to get that message out there and to have, so it's not only a text-based conversation or a verbal conversation, but it also has images, and I love images. So, so this is what we're talking about. I would have loved to have shared my screen and shown you a whole bunch of images of different things, but I know that's not what this podcast is all about. But yeah, no, I think that this is a good example. I hope I'm not being too obvious, but I thought I'd just throw that one in.
We're all peeping at your website while you're talking, John. Don't worry about that. At least I am.
Well, I kind of mentioned it enough times, didn't I?
That's beautiful. Are there any other questions in this conversation or that came up for the other guys in the room? Yes, Mohammed.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to discuss. Is my sound clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm from Saudi Arabia, where the topic of sustainability is becoming so important since the announcement of Saudi Vision 2030. So one of the objectives of that vision is what they called it Saudi Green Initiatives, which aims to reduce the carbon emission, plant 10 billion trees, and protect 30% of land and sea. I think this behavior of leader would motivate the organization and also the individual to achieve the environmental goal. But what about the artist? What about the creativity in accelerating achieving that environmental goal? Because as far as I know, the artist or the creativity is not included in the Saudi initiatives.
Well, I think it's a great thing that you brought that up. I think absolutely. To get artists involved in this, I think what it does is that it provides, if you see yourself as a circle and you've got the circle divided into all of these different segments, let's say we divided into 4 segments. One is about sustainability initiatives in the green. One is about sustainability and initiatives in the city, et cetera, and then you've got artists' visions for change or something like that. And they can come in, or we can come in with very good design elements and other elements that can help people to relate to it, so that it's not just a governmental exercise and it's not just a policy that people are going to go, or somebody else will look after it. I think that artists can be a really good meeting point between the general public and those who are making the governmental decisions, who are making a lot of these, who are making a lot of these policies that are going to be changing things for the better. And artists can come in and be a part of that and be a proactive part of it that make the connections even easier for the general public to embrace. Now, I don't know whether this is what you were really referring to, but I think that that's what I would say about it, because I think that that's our role, is somehow or other to make that connection easier between a lot of those policymakers and the general public, simply because of the beauty and the creativity that we can bring to the table. Does that help, Mohammed?
Yeah. What I mean is how to promote the importance of sustainability for individual beside the leaders. So we need other elements. So yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's okay. And I think that letters to politicians and in whatever ways it can be promoted, the need for artistic involvement and for leaders in the arts industry to come forward and be an integrated part of some of this policy making. I think that is really important, and the more the better, because I think it's going to have a greater impact that way. Otherwise, it'll be, I think it has a chance of being a lot of these policies being seen as being greenwash, so that it's good for 1 year or for one term of government, and then the next government forgets about it because it's not so important. If it becomes integrated and you've got enough people, and artists tend to hang around, they're not there for 4 years, they're there for a lifetime. So I think that's something that we can keep in mind.
Thank you, John.
So much.
Thank you.
Kayum, you have a question.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I have a very simple question though, John. Do you think that for realizing the messages, inner messages of art, it's sometimes not really very understandable for the mass people? It needs the inner messages. As the understanding on inner messages, people needs to learn the inner issues of arts. What do you think about the issue that?
No, I don't believe so. No, I don't believe. Sure, sorry. Yeah, I don't believe that there's a necessity really for any deep inner understanding of the complexities of contemporary art theory or anything like this. And that's something that I've been very fortunate with this particular art making process, is that I have 5-year-old children who come into my exhibitions and look at the work and be amazed at some of the familiar objects that they're seeing as artworks on the wall. And I've had 90-year-old grandparents walking in and going and laughing, and or being struck by the deadly seriousness of the issue or whatever it is, and everybody having an equal, because it's very accessible. In a lot of ways, this work is very accessible, and that's been something that I've really enjoyed about this particular expression that I've invented over the years. And I keep inventing new styles of expression with these various plastics and with these various environmental statements that I'm making, that it somehow or other it stays very accessible. It's not necessarily really cerebral work. It's more a celebration of color, and at the same time, it's also a statement of our contemporary society and some of the excesses that we have, which is the inability of big corporations and governments to take responsibility for the rubbish and for the disposal of a lot of these plastics. And now there are a lot of these governments and big companies are being forced into taking responsibility for it. And we're starting to see some big changes with that. But when people come into these exhibitions, whether they're seeing sculptures, whether they're seeing works on the wall, I don't think I've had one person saying to me, but I don't really understand it. It's not, I don't have that. What I have had is some people saying, this work I find is really, really confronting, because it's exposed me to the enormity, or at least the taste of the enormity of what we're doing to our oceans. And I've had some people say, I love your sense of humor in what you're doing in these works, but I haven't had one person yet who said that I don't understand it. So I hope this is just my honest response to this question. Yes.
No,
But thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I would love to conclude the conversation at this point, and with highlighting something that I find really, really valuable for everyone in the art space, in the communication space, in the whole space of sustainable communication and engagement, environmental engagement and empowerment, which was really your idea of the artist being the meeting point between the public and then kind of people on like a policy level or corporate level, which brings me to really the point that artists are one version or one form of curators of change, because
Yes.
and this is really great. I can see another question, another risen hand. So Sarah, if you want to ask a very quick question, that would be lovely.
Yes.
Short
Hi,
answer.
thank you. This is Sarah from Saudi Arabia. I'm just asking the doctor about, do you think when there is a lot of artists that responsible about doing sustainable art, that encourage the others to have more waste? For example, if I have someone to pay for me, I'm gonna do whatever I want or take whatever I want. Have you ever, doctor, made that thing?
Maybe you can rephrase that question for me. I missed the connection in there, please. Sorry.
Okay. Yes. Do you think if there is a lot of sustainable artists that encourage the people to waste more rubbish, that mean, yeah, I'm gonna use 10 bottles for this week of plastic because there is my neighbor, he will use it for the art, so it's okay for use this.
Oh, that's so funny. I'm sorry for laughing. Sorry, but I find that
No, I believe because I meet that actually personally. Yeah. So what do you think, doctor?
No, I don't believe.
Okay.
I don't believe that people will use more and waste more because they see this. No, I honestly, I cannot imagine that would be the case. There's really enough out there already. Yes, no, this is not, I laugh simply because I find it's a really unusual question, and it brings some humor into the conversation here. For me, other people might find it much more serious. But however, I just cannot see that this would be a possibility. Yeah, I can't see that people would want to waste more because they see art being made out of this stuff.
And I think
I could be wrong, but I can't imagine it.
But I think it directs us towards the, I think it's a very, very crucial question as well for all of us to think about audiences, and that there's not one audience, but there are people who might get very different ideas from the artwork, and might be inspired and might be intrigued to do very different things with what they see. And so I think it is very valuable that we've talked about how important it is to offer some conversations around that, and to offer some, or to at least think about spaces where all these different kind of questions and different thoughts that came up. Sarah, I think that's a very valuable sort of thought, and it's really important that there's some space to talk about it from different perspectives, and kind of gather all those questions and gather all those perspectives to learn. And this is really wonderful. And I definitely my most important takeaway is really to think about this curating of these conversations and how far artists themselves than the curators, not necessarily just about of the conversations, but even more the curators of change. And I really like that image. A massive thank you to you, John.
Oh, it's a pleasure, absolutely pleasure. I really appreciate it. I've appreciated all of the questions and being able to share some of the insights that I've had, some of the experiences that I've had as a working environmental artist, and with you all. And thank you for your attention and for being present here while I've been able to deliver this. It's been really great.
Now, very, very grateful. Thanks everyone for being here. And I'm really looking forward to all the conversations that grow out of that and being in touch. And we definitely stay in touch and have more conversations like this.
Yeah, no, that sounds
Thanks,
great.
everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Very
See you.
nice. Yeah.
Bye.
See you. Thank you.